Understandably lost in the news cycle after the Trump not raid story broke on Monday night is what led many broadcasts and homepages during the day prior. There was a supposed anti-Muslim serial killer on the loose in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Every hijab and turban was at risk of instant death at any moment. Muslim residents are in a managed panic, reported the New York Times, after the killings of 4 Muslim men leave the community in fear. And that was the commonly repeated word: Muslim fear, Muslim fear, Muslim fear. But fear of what? That was the question yet to be answered. And for many media outlets who otherwise love questioning conclusions by use of the phrase "without evidence," that didn't happen in this case. Instead, a general understanding of the story was just assumed without evidence. Although, in fairness, given the timing and fairly small Muslim community in Albuquerque, it wasn't necessarily unreasonable to assume the killings had some relationship to each other. There were 4 of them, and 3 within just 2 weeks. It started last November with the killing of Muhammad Ahmadi outside a business he operated with his brother, and then on July 26th, Aftab Hussein was killed. On August 1st, Muhammad Afzal Hussein was killed, both in the same part of the city. On August 5th, Naeem Hussein was killed, only hours after attending the funeral of the prior 2 killed. The most recent 3 all shared the Hussein name, but apparently there is no immediate family relationship. The first man killed in November was Afghan. The subsequent 3 were all Pakistani. And they all had connections to the same mosque, the Islamic Center of New Mexico. 3 were regular attendees, and the other was friendly with that mosque community. Because of these connections between the victims, police speculated last weekend the killings may be connected and sought public help in finding a vehicle of interest that was spotted at least one of the murder scenes. And from investigators, that was it. No suspect identified, no motive provided, just please help us find this car. But that lack of detail, of course, didn't stop media and political reactors from saying, or at least implying, that they knew a little something more about who did this and why. The president tweeted, "These hateful attacks have no place in America," after noting a full investigation is still ongoing and not explaining how he reached the conclusion that the events were hateful. The mayor of Albuquerque told CNN that the killings are clearly hate-driven, the obvious targeting of Muslim men in the refugee community because members of that community are now afraid to leave their homes and afraid to pray or go to school. The implication from the mayor was that the killer must be some sort of hateful outsider. And those claims of outsider-inflicted fear were repeated on several national TV news broadcasts on the story.
People are so scared, they're missing prayer service.
Well, they are. I mean, they're missing their daily routine. They're missing their life. They're missing their sanity.
Some members of Albuquerque's Muslim community are too afraid to leave their homes for groceries. So the mayor says he's arranging for hot meals to be brought straight to their doorsteps.
And the New York Times highlighted anti-Muslim hate crime statistics in their coverage, again, strongly implying that's what this story is an example of. It's part of a trend of anti-Muslim hate crimes. The AP's coverage was even more preposterous, quoting a Muslim leader in New York who says she is very afraid, but has no personal connection to the actual story. She also says she has an unnamed, also unconnected friend in Michigan who's now afraid to be seen in public wearing her hijab. Okay, so just the fear of uninvolved people from thousands of miles away based on pure assumption about the story. That's what passes for objective, just the facts news coverage, and we're supposed to give that a pass because hate crime is a supposedly reasonable inference in this case. But if, however, you had speculated, hey, maybe this is inter-Muslim conflict, how do we know the killer isn't Muslim himself? That would not have been a reasonable inference. In fact, you yourself would have been hateful for that, but then the truth hit. On Tuesday, police announced an arrest in the case, and shockingly, no, it is not Hitler's long-lost grandson or a hooded guy taking a break from his usual cross-burning hobby. Instead, Muhammad Syed was arrested, a 51-year-old Afghan charged in 2 of the killings, Muhammad and Aftab Hussein, and Syed is now considered the primary suspect in the other 2 killings as well. And it's not just the speculation that the killings were anti-Muslim that was wrong. It's the speculation that the killings were done by an outsider at all. It's not an assumption that the suspect Syed is Muslim. because he also attended the same mosque that the victims did. For all of this fear that was projected onto the greater Albuquerque community, the actual killer was within the same mosque walls the whole time. The New York Times is reporting that investigators believe that the killings may be related to some sort of marriage dispute. Syed is a Sunni Muslim, and his daughter reportedly married a Shiite, and so he may have targeted the victims in some sort of retaliation for that. But that claim is disputed by one of the victims' brothers, who says his brother was single and Sunni, so that explanation doesn't make sense to him. But whatever happened, it is clear this dispute was personal, because according to court records, Syed knew his victims, and Syed's daughter and Syed's wife knew the victims as well. In no way was this some sort of anonymous targeting as originally speculated. And while reporters and politicians were hyping the fear from this Muslim community, they apparently were ignoring the truth that came from that same community. Syed was identified through a tip to police from within this Albuquerque mosque, meaning all of those propagandizing on behalf of the Muslims weren't even listening to the Muslims at all. So this arrest was no surprise to at least some in this Muslim community, and Syed's crimes against this community aren't surprising either, because this isn't the first time he's committed them. That's why this mosque community is now asking the court to keep Syed in jail pending trial, citing not just accusations of domestic violence, but video they have of him slashing tires on a car outside the mosque, which happened in 2020. Syed was admonished by mosque leadership and asked not to return. The woman whose tires he slashed is the sister-in-law of one of the guys he recently killed. So this guy was a known criminal, hostile to this mosque and specific individuals within it, known previous hostilities to a person he later killed, or at least his family. And if anybody had bothered to ask around before reporting, they likely would have learned at least some of that information. And ironically, Syed tried to use the false impression created by the propaganda to his own benefit in his attempted escape. He was arrested 100 miles outside of Albuquerque, telling police he was on his way to Texas, citing the murders as his concern. Well, Albuquerque just isn't safe for Muslims, so he was working to move his family to Houston, he told police. So the false narrative created was nearly an alibi for the killer himself, but we're supposed to believe that compassion over facts is what any decent person would do. Oh, but it wasn't just blind compassion. There was a factual basis to believe that these killings were likely hate crimes. No, there was not. Not just because the specifics were readily available to anybody who actually bothered to look, but because even the general trends did not support the conclusion that was prematurely drawn in this case. General trends indicated exactly what happened. In the early coverage of this story, anti-Muslim hate crimes were commonly mentioned, but the key footnote is the frequency. They are actually very rare. According to FBI data, there were just 176 incidents in the country in 2019. And these incidents aren't necessarily convictions or even charges. They're just reports. They're just claims, often never solved, which means many could be misrepresented or even outright fake. And in Albuquerque specifically, there has been an average of just one anti-Muslim hate crime incident a year in recent years. And again, that is a count of reports, not charges, not convictions, just claims, not established facts. And for murders in general, also rare are those committed by a stranger, as was alleged in this case. Just some hateful outsider targeting Muslims out of intolerance. But in only about 10% of murders nationwide is the killer a stranger to the victim. Anti-Muslim hatred is a very rare murder motive, but so too is just a murderous attack on a stranger in general, let alone 4 of them. In 90% or so of murder cases, there's some personal dispute between the killer and the victim, just as there was in this case. In other words, what was presumed in this case is actually incredibly rare. What was overlooked is actually incredibly common, but we're supposed to accept that the premature conclusion was somehow a reasonable one, despite it defying all statistical trends. But of course, following statistical trends was never the method or the intent. Only creating the impression of them was. So it doesn't matter that anti-Muslim hate crimes are extremely rare. The purpose of the coverage is to get you in a mindset that believes they're actually extremely common. And to that end, the narrative driving the story has to live on, even when the facts of the story do completely defy it. Fear turns to shock among Albuquerque Muslims as the truth has been revealed that the shooter is a Muslim. That's the new updated headline from NPR. First of all, that's not true. There isn't shock if the tip that led to the arrest of the killer came from within that Muslim community. They aren't shocked. They knew the whole time, and that's how the truth was revealed. But two, note the twist. Now that the criminal has been revealed as a Muslim, anti-Muslim sentiment is still somehow the victimizing force. Muslim fear may be over, but worry about how Muslims are perceived is the new threat. The fear has dissipated, but the tension remains, NPR reports, because this Muslim community is still worried about perceptions of Muslims in America. When one Muslim commits a crime, non-Muslims view the entire faith as extreme. Okay, so the murders are now just a footnote to your attitude about them. Again, the priority in the reporting is clear. The truth of the matter itself is secondary to making sure that you have the right view of it. Wait, don't worry about the bodies. It's the perception of the bodies that counts. In this case, that's literal, but that's a mantra that holds at least metaphorical truth in just about any story that you see. It's not the truth that they're after. It's just what you think about it. And bodies are an acceptable cost in that effort. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Gab. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.